I will begin by saying that I absolutely denounce totalitarian and brutal dictatorships because the issue is we feel that repercussions from those dictatorships, that authoritarianism, not just in the international market, but also in the United States in many difficult ways. So I denounce all of that. We stand against that. We stand against authoritarianism. We stand against Putin, usually, universally. But that's kind of not really what this bill is doing here. It is, I will say, taking up a lot of space and raising questions about what just do you mean when you say we oppose socialism in all its forms in a adopting resolution when, we heard one version here today that said it's when the budget gets too big. So what does that mean when the budget gets too big? I supported what we did in the American Rescue Plan because we needed it, because our country was going off of an economic cliff. And if we hadn't stepped in, we don't know the problem that we would have had to climb out of. So I'm really proud to have spent my first year here voting for the American Rescue Plan and voting for those budgets that were larger. And I'm really excited about today, right, that some would, I've heard some on the other side of the aisle, and presidents, as our ranking member pointed out, say that Social Security or Medicare and Medicaid are socialism. Well, guess what? Today is the anniversary, the 83rd year anniversary of the first Social Security check going out. And what we should be doing is singing it, happy birthday to Social Security, because so many of my constituents, when I go around to my district, as we just heard from the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania, I don't hear about this. What I hear is they want to make sure that their Social Security checks are going to continue to flow to their mailboxes without cuts, without privatization, without any of the attacks that we're hearing from the other side. So that's why having the ability to amend this resolution to make it very clear what it is intended to do, which we all agree that we all denounce totalitarian, authoritarian, and socialism in terms of what that looks like in North Korea, in those places in the Americas that are suffering, that are dear to my heart. We know that, but what does that clause mean? So that's why it is problemsome that we don't have the ability to amend, which I understand we might try to, but we'll see what we get to. And Chairman McHenry, I need to tell you that this is sort of my first week on rules, so they told me I had to come, so I showed up. But I love hearing you talk about what you want to do. I've spent my life before getting to Congress taking capital to places where it wasn't before, because small places can do big things, but not if they don't have the capital. And so I spent, I got about $1 billion of capital in places that no one would have expected that it could go and should go. And that's a lot for a little state like New Mexico. So thank you for that. But those are the things we need to be talking about. Because when I'm out in my district, my ranchers and farmers, they want to know, what are we going to do so there aren't monopolies about the number of meat plants, so that they can sell their cattle for what it's worth when they are having a hard time making a profit and those concentrated businesses are making record profits. Well, they raise the cattle and suffer through the droughts. So those are the things that I think we should be spending our time on, rather than agreeing that we all do, that those authoritarian dictatorships and socialistic dictatorships are bad. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support this resolution. We're supporting the bedrock of this country, the foundation of America, capitalism. Socialism is directly opposite from that. And we are creeping at a fast rate towards socialism, and particularly with this administration. Now, Ms. Waters, I like you. You and I are good friends. You're real easy to call your fellow members of Congress terrorists, extremists, but when Guy Rushenthal's asked you to denounce Putin, Stalin, Xi Jinping, you wouldn't do it. You get back to Trump, and I get that. But these are countries that this administration is supporting. And let me give you some examples. Patrick, you're chairman of the financial, basically anything that goes through this Congress with the financial committee. Dollars mean something, don't they? What does it mean to this country when $80 billion was left in Afghanistan? Trucks, armory. That's money, isn't it? Why did this administration take that path? That's got to be answered. Russia was brought up. Why was the Nord Stream pipeline opened back up under this administration, under a dictatorship with Russia? Why was American oil cut off from the American citizens? And why does this administration like the dictator countries to purchase our oil? 5 countries have 40% of the production in this world, U.S. being one of them, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. Why does this administration choose to have them make profits on the backs of the American people? Somebody needs to explain that. You say we're not inching toward socialism? The facts prove otherwise with this administration. And Mr. Trump, you keep mentioning Ms. Waters, I'm glad you mentioned him. He stopped all this. He stopped the slide toward socialism. He opened up American energy production. He opened up the free enterprise. We had the biggest boom in the history of this country. And the fact that just these 3, we've had the biggest, as Thomas mentioned, we've had the biggest expansion of government in my lifetime. That's why we've got to remind people in this resolution that socialism has to be denounced. The actions of this administration prove otherwise. The actions of what they are putting our dollars to. It is a insult to the American people to say anything otherwise. So, Mr. McKinney, you want to comment on any of the?
I think you said it well enough. Look, discretionary spending is dramatically up from pre-COVID levels. That will be highlighted in our budget resolution. That's the hope among House Republicans. Our hope is that we can get a spending agreement with the administration. And since the debt ceiling was mentioned, this president has said something that no president said in the last 40 years. We're not going to negotiate around a debt ceiling. He needs to be reminded that he led the negotiations as vice president for President Obama around a debt ceiling agreement in 2011. So we certainly will raise the debt ceiling, but in connection with a fiscal agreement with the administration, with the Senate. That's outcome, I think, is rational and commensurate with a Democrat Congress with a Republican president and a Republican Congress with a Democrat president and every different version of it. But the fundamentals of our economy, the American people understand what inflation is anew. They haven't experienced inflation that we're currently facing in 40 years, and they don't like it. And they want to know why. Well, it's because the last Congress, actually the last 2 Congresses, spent more money in peacetime than any previous Congress. So our fiscal house matters in connection with our economic prosperity. Our governmental policies matter in context to our prosperity as well. And frankly, I think we need to have a healthy debate between Democrats and Republicans about these bigger things. And then certainly the contours of policy underlying that. And we need to agree where we can and move public policy forward. And in divided government, I think we can get those agreements so we can improve our economy and make us more resilient and more competitive internationally against our main competitor and foe globally in China. But we're debating a resolution that has the opening clause and the closing clause of things that I think are pretty simple and straightforward. Whereas socialist ideologies necessitate a concentration of power that has time and time again collapsed into communism, communist regimes, totalitarian rule, and brutal dictatorships, right? And then resolved that Congress denounces socialism in all its forms and opposes the implementation of socialist policies in the United States of America. That's, what the author, Ms. Salazar, wrote. We can all nuance this stuff in our own words and what we'd like, but that's the resolution before us, and I think it's something we should endorse.
It's pretty simple, and I think we can have bipartisan support. I look for every Democrat to vote for this. If they believe it, I think they need to vote for condemning socialism and giving all the accolades to what's made this country great is capitalism. And that has not been the course of action that I can remember from this administration. And if there's ever anything that's at the top of the forefront, it's the slide into government-controlled socialism, which we have to.
Will the gentleman yield for?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and Ms. Waters said she's a capitalist. I'm wondering, is it intentional that the word capitalism is not in this resolution at all? And is anyone could explain why Putin is not mentioned as one of the bad leaders that should be condemned? I mean, we're talking about capitalism here, but it's not mentioned at all in this resolution. And Putin is not mentioned either. I'm just wondering if there's a reason why.
Socialism is.
No, why wasn't capitalism mentioned? That was my question.
Well, you could list, I don't know how many different items if you want to break it down. Socialism covers the very thing that we're against. It covers all the problems that if we slide into, I mean, you could put capitalism in it, but we don't need to do that. We're condemning socialism, which your party ought to be easily for.
But why wasn't Putin mentioned as somebody that we should condemn?
Why should he be in there? You're going to list.
You asked Ranking Member Waters to condemn Putin, and I think Putin should. I know I condemn Putin. I think he's a thug.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, Mr. McGovern.
You brought Putin up. That's what I'm.
Well, Guy just asked if she would condemn him, and she wouldn't do it. Let me ask this: if we include,
but why isn't? I'm just asking, why isn't Putin in this resolution as the people that we should denounce?
Let me ask you this:
and why are we not supporting capitalism?
Let me ask you
I don't
this.
know. Maybe there's a reason. Maybe there's not.
I'm reclaiming my time,
Okay.
Mr. McGovern. Let me ask you this: if we put capitalism in there, and if we put the different dictators, would you support this resolution?
I think I would want a little bit more, like a clarification of what policies are you getting at?
Okay. What would it take for you to vote for this resolution?
Well, I mean, I think I would like to have in here a clear understanding that Social Security and Medicare are off the table.
That's a political statement that that's fine. That has nothing
I don't know,
to
but
do
that's
with
what I'm worried
socialism.
about. That's what I'm worried
That
about.
has nothing to do with socialism.
That's the whole point of our concern.
Reclaiming my time. I support this amendment. This is a very simple amendment that should get no kickback from either party. This is very simple, and this country is what's made us great, as we've talked about. So support it, and I hope it moves forward. I yield back.
Before I move to our next, I would just advise all the members, please don't speak over one another.